Okay, welcome back. Today you should have your value strip paper in front of you. You will need scissors, a cup of water, um, a little plastic paint palette, your brushes, and your paint pod. Take your scissors and cut along the line that you drew last time when you were making your value strip. You can set that value strip up at the top of your workspace. Next, you're going to get your ruler and measure halfway on your paper. Should be approximately 5 inches. If you don't have a ruler, you can just kind of eyeball this and divide your paper in half. So right now I'm going to make a little mark at the 5-inch and a little mark at the top. Connect the dots. And then cut along your drawn line. So you should have 2 pieces of watercolor paper that are approximately the same size. Set one off to the side. If you happen to have masking tape, you could tape your paper down to your table. A lot of watercolor artists will kind of frame their paper with masking tape, so that's an option for you. So now that you have your space all set up, we're going to begin putting some paint on our palette using our brushes and water and our paint pod. It's up to you what size brush you want to use. I really think for this first study that we're going to be doing, which is going to look kind of like stems with little leaves, you're going to want to use your rounded brush, so your smaller brush that came in your art kit. So activate your paint pod, some water, and when you mix this, you don't want your paint to be real gummy, so don't dig down really deep into your paint pod, and just add plenty of water onto your palette so you get a nice puddle of paint. For our first step, we're going to be creating a very light value of a little stem with a leaf. So put some clean water off to the side and bring in some of that first puddle of pigment to make a light value. And using the tip of your brush, create a nice thin line, maybe curves off to the left or the right of your paper. I'm going to add a little more pigment to my puddle just so you can see it better. And then you're going to create a couple little kind of stems or branches of various heights. Try to practice using the tip of your brush. Some artists might refer to it like a ballerina on their tippy toe, so very soft pressure when you're doing that. And then your leaf is the shape of an eye or an almond. It's okay if your leaves touch the edge of your paper. Again, trying to keep a really light value for these first leaves and stems. And the branches are kind of coming off of the center and parting left or right. After you get about 5 stems and leaves painted in your light value, you're going to set that off to the side to dry. Watercolor requires some patience and time to allow things to dry. While that's drying, grab your other watercolor paper, and this one you're going to turn horizontal. And this watercolor study is going to be one that looks like mountains, hills and mountains off in the distance. So grab a pencil, and you're actually going to sketch this one out first. Find about a quarter of the way down from the top. So there's the halfway point, so come up a little bit. And you're going to start to draw some mountains in the distance. Now you draw very lightly, so you have less to erase. I'm going to press a little harder so you can see it on the video. And don't make your mountains look perfect. You want them to have some variety in their texture, in their height. It should not look like a perfect EKG heart monitor. So now you're going to do another row of mountains in front of that. Again, kind of offset it so they don't match the first row of mountains. Have some variety in there. And now another row of hills. And a final row of hills in the foreground. These won't have as many peaks, sharp peaks to them, but they still can have some variety. Next, I'd like you to take your eraser and lighten your lines, especially if you pressed hard. If you had a really, really soft touch, okay, after you've erased all your lines and got rid of all your little eraser pieces, you're going to start painting your top portion, and that's going to be the lightest value. Oftentimes when you look at a landscape, things that are off in the distance look more faded and dull, and that's called atmospheric perspective. So we're going to practice this with our monochromatic painting. starting with a very light value of watercolor. Get some water on your brush, and you're trying to get a value that's near the lightest end of your value strip. And you can decide what size brush you want to use, whether you want to use your larger flat brush or your rounded brush. And you're going to take that light value, that light watercolor, and fill in your sky. We're going to call that your sky. It's okay if you don't have blue paint. I just happen to have a blue pod. If you have an orange sky, a purple sky, a pink sky, it's totally fine because it's a monochromatic painting. Right now it looks like I hardly had any pigment on that, and that's okay. It was very subtle. Set that off to the side and grab your other painting, and hopefully it has had time to dry. And now you're going to mix up a little bit darker value than your first value. So take from your little puddle of darker watercolor there, and using again the tip of your brush, you're going to add some more stems and leaves. So we're doing a little bit of drawing with our paintbrush, and then we're filling in. And as an artist, you kind of have to figure out where you want your stems and leaves to fall, what makes sense as to where you place them. I'm kind of putting mine in the negative spaces where there aren't any leaves currently, but certainly leaves can overlap each other. And as you finish up that leaf, this will be a good stopping point for today. Set your papers off to the side and to dry for our next time in class. And clean up your supplies, and we'll finish this our next time together.